All right, let's jump straight into a really fascinating, entirely hypothetical scenario today. Imagine waking up to global headlines that aren't announcing a sudden, explosive war, but rather something much more subtle. A scenario where a superpower has been outplayed, outlasted, and outmaneuvered in a way nobody really thought was possible. So in this explainer, we're going to walk through this cinematic thought experiment, the strategic maze of what would actually happen if Iran overcame the United States.
Now, you might be wondering, how is that even possible? It sounds like one of those impossible scenarios people just throw around in late-night debates, right? But history shows us time and time again that the most shocking global shifts almost always start as scenarios nobody takes seriously. We aren't talking about a massive military invasion here. We're looking at a fundamental shift in strategy, influence, and global leverage that completely flips our expectations upside down.
So first things first, we need to redefine what it actually means to win. Actually, scratch the idea of total conquest. In this analysis, overcoming means something very specific. It means outlasting pressure. It's about gaining regional dominance, exposing a giant's vulnerabilities, breaking apart their coalitions, and ultimately forcing a much larger rival to retreat from a position they assumed was totally untouchable. It's all about leverage and endurance.
To put that into perspective, let's look at how power is measured. On one hand, you have the traditional metrics of raw power. We're talking armies, aircraft, advanced missiles. But on the other hand, you have the modern tools of asymmetric warfare. Things like sheer resilience, complex alliances, cyber capabilities, precise timing, and endurance. It really forces us to confront this uncomfortable reality. Sometimes, asymmetric power and absolute patience can maneuver completely around raw military might.
I love this quote because it hits the nail right on the head. Strength alone is not the same thing as control. Yes, the United States obviously has unmatched global reach, but this perfectly captures how a smaller power can make itself strategically unavoidable. See, a superpower has global commitments all over the map. A smaller rival? Well, they can succeed just by focusing entirely on absolute control over a few specific high-leverage areas. And here is exactly how they would do it. Notice how Iran could use its specific geography to hyper-focus on just a handful of critical nodes that matter to the whole world. You don't need a massive, globe-spanning navy if you can squeeze energy corridors and key maritime choke points. You mix that with regional alliances, proxy influence, targeted cyber operations, and information warfare, and suddenly you've got a highly concentrated toolkit built specifically to throw a massive opponent off balance.
Let's watch how this snowball effect actually builds. It wouldn't be one big dramatic event. Instead, it's a series of seemingly minor moves. First, maybe a shipping disruption over here. Then, a sudden, unexplained cyber incident over there. Before you know it, oil prices spike, and then political fractures start forming. In isolation, these just look like your standard daily news cycle. But combined, they form this coordinated pattern of pressure that forces a superpower to play whack-a-mole everywhere at once.
And the global economy? It would feel the tension almost immediately. This proves you don't need the biggest military to make the whole world react. Oil markets would panic. Shipping insurance costs would literally go through the roof. Businesses freeze their investments, airlines have to reroute, and supply chains entirely jam up. This geopolitical chess match suddenly hits you and me right at the grocery store or the gas pump. The cost of just the uncertainty alone would grow way faster than the actual price of fuel.
So how does Washington respond? Logically, they'd use the familiar playbook: heavy sanctions, stern warnings, military patrols. But here is the massive dilemma. Every single response has a catch. If the opponent's behavior doesn't change, every move risks either hardening their resistance or making the US look weak. If you push too hard, you risk an all-out escalation. If you pull back, you lose credibility. It's a lose-lose where every action carries a really steep cost.
Just look at the deep contrast in how these two sides view time. The U.S. has global commitments, intense domestic political cycles, and a public that demands rapid, decisive results. They want it solved yesterday. Iran, on the flip side, is playing a game built entirely on escalation management, strategic patience, and just pure endurance. And in a long, drawn-out contest, the side that stays focused long after the headlines fade is usually the one that gains the upper hand.
It's crucial to understand this isn't just one isolated target. It's an asymmetric web. This is exactly what makes the strategy so unbelievably difficult to dismantle. It's this giant network of relationships and pressure points. It's like a spider web. If you pluck one string over here, 3 others react unexpectedly over there, which severely complicates any direct, straightforward plans the US might have. As the months drag on in this thought experiment, this one central crisis really takes center stage, and it tests a massive assumption. Can America still organize coalitions and maintain deterrence the way it always has? For decades, American power has rested on the absolute certainty that it can prevent rivals from redrawing the map. But what happens if a rival realizes they don't have to defeat American power, they just have to make it incredibly expensive and exhausting to use?
Because remember, power is also heavily based on what everyone else believes you can do. If allies start to doubt American consistency, the psychological battlefield completely shifts. Think about it. If you start doubting your protection, you naturally look for alternatives. You hedge your bets. Meanwhile, rivals are watching this, and they become far more daring. In geopolitics, the perception of power is absolutely just as crucial as the reality of it.
Ultimately, Iran's biggest achievement in this scenario wouldn't be on a physical battlefield. It would be narrative. It's this powerful story spreading like wildfire across the globe that the old rules just don't apply anymore. Symbolism is huge. If a nation can stand up to a superpower, survive the immense pressure, and not completely collapse, well, that story totally rewrites what smaller nations believe is actually possible.
And the ripple effects? They're massive. Instability near major energy routes forces literally every major power on Earth to recalculate. Europe instantly starts panicking over energy security and potential migration crises. Asian economies have to brace for massive shipping disruptions. And you can bet rivals like Russia and China are watching closely, ready to exploit the distraction, while the US is bogged down in this prolonged, messy struggle.
Meanwhile, what's happening back home in the US? Fierce domestic arguments would completely erupt. Is the country being challenged, humiliated, or just tested? You'd see endless cable news debates. Some people would demand hard, immediate retaliation. Others would loudly call for restraint, arguing we're already way too entangled overseas. And the craziest part is, all of these conflicting arguments might feel completely valid at the exact same time.
Which brings us to this really brutal reality of geopolitical failure. A nation can still be powerful and still be losing ground in specific ways that matter enormously. It is so incredibly hard to measure when a country is still militarily dominant, yet losing its global leverage. The United States would still be enormously capable in this scenario, but having the largest military on Earth doesn't guarantee a clean win if you're being outmaneuvered on the margins. So let's map out the breaking point. It's a sequence of decisions in critical places, like the Strait of Hormuz, that pushes the whole global system to the absolute brink. Again, not one single confrontation. Tensions rise, prompting frantic emergency diplomacy. Sanctions fail because workarounds were already built. Cyber pressure disrupts everything for both sides, and other regional actors jump in to exploit the chaos. It stops being a direct two-player rivalry and becomes a massive, interconnected system under extreme stress.
And at this breaking point, something has to give. The US might actually be forced to accept a strategically unsatisfying compromise, which makes the very rival they were trying to contain completely unavoidable. When the global system is under this much stress, you get unexpected outcomes. Maybe the US just decides the long-term cost of total confrontation is too high. So, overcoming here doesn't mean a battlefield defeat for the US. It means the fundamental terms of the global game have permanently shifted.
Now, to be totally clear, this isn't some easy victory lap for Iran. Gaining greater influence invites massive risks. It means harsh retaliation, counterbalancing from other powers, and deep, deep internal sacrifice. Success against a superpower means you now have to survive what you've just won. Your allies become more demanding, your internal expectations skyrocket, and you're left managing a much more unstable world. It's a tightrope walk fraught with enormous danger.
This quote really sums it up. Even a superpower may find itself trapped in a strategic maze. If a rival can just absorb the pressure and make every countermove endlessly expensive, that illusion of effortless American dominance, it simply disappears. And when that illusion vanishes, the entire world gets much more nervous, careful, and painfully honest about the risks of escalation. No one is immune to strategic erosion forever.
In the middle of all this chaos, what does real leadership actually look like? Well, it's not about just winning arguments on TV. It's about managing uncertainty and preventing a catastrophic chain reaction of misjudgments. Real leaders know exactly when to push and when to pause. They understand that a strategic humiliation can create long-term global instability just as fast as a military failure. The danger isn't one isolated mistake. It's a slow, compounding chain of underestimations.
History shows us that nations usually fall because they just failed to adapt to a changing world. It highlights a really hard truth. Victory often goes to patience and asymmetry, not just direct force. In this alternate future, if the US loses ground, it wouldn't be because they stopped being powerful. It would be because they relied entirely on blunt force without the flexibility needed to counter a patient, long-term asymmetric strategy.
And that leads us to the deepest lesson of this whole explainer. Power without flexibility becomes less effective over time. That is a reality leaders everywhere would be staring at while totally rewriting their assumptions about 21st century power. Both sides would learn something they can't unlearn. Iran proves the strategic environment can be bent, and the US learns that pure strength can actually be boxed in by superior leverage.
So, I want to leave you with this uncomfortable but absolutely fascinating question to ponder. Does the future of global power belong to the biggest actor or the smartest adapter? Because as we've explored today, the player with the most pieces doesn't always control the board. Thank you so much for exploring the strategic maze with us. It's a scenario that really challenges everything we assume about global dominance. Keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.